kind of a little bit bittersweet watching the film. There are several faces in the film that aren't able to be here tonight. We had an event at the Space and Rocket Center for the 40th anniversary of Skylab, and at that time, 8 of the Skylab astronauts were in attendance here. During the years since that anniversary event, we've lost a third of the Skylab astronauts. I wanted to give the panelists, particularly those, the astronauts, the family members, those that knew them best, to just kind of, if you had any stories you wanted to tell about some of the folks that couldn't be here for this event, be a nice opportunity to honor them.
I'm Amy Bean, and as everybody knows, my father passed away May 26th, and one of the things I really wanted to say is that he so enjoyed every moment when he came to Huntsville to train. He loved the Space Center here, the people, the personnel, the support personnel. He just felt a special bond to all the people here. And one of the things he used to say, particularly about Skylab, is he felt Skylab was his finest moment as an astronaut. You know, he went to the moon, he was a rookie then. He didn't know anything, of course, was on a great crew, they helped him. But when he went on Skylab, he just felt he was at his best. And that meant a lot to him. It was just really the peak of his astronaut career, and I know that he felt a lot of that was due to the people here in Huntsville and of course to his fellow crew members.
All right.
I'll echo that certainly about Al. He was a great person to work with and a hard driver, wanting everything perfect, but at the same time he was a very compassionate person. The other person that flew was Pete Conrad. Pete was a unique individual. As you see in the movie, he was a very fun-loving guy, and so people sometimes miss the depth of his capability. But if there was anybody who I wanted to fly with as a pilot or as a commander, because of his skill and his dedication, it would be Pete Conrad. He was just one of the most superb people I have ever met in that respect. But I was just support crew for Apollo 12, which had Pete Conrad and Al Bean and Dick Gordon, and that was a laugh a minute. But when it came time to get the job done, they did it. And I'll echo also the words that Sue just said about being here in Huntsville. This is kind of a second home. We spent, most of us, a good part of our 3 or 4 years over here, and then we had to go home, and our wives demanded to get back there, so we did, get the chores done. But we really loved it here. People here were just so open and friendly and dedicated to getting the job done. And so it's just really good to be back home, and I see so many happy, familiar faces. Just can't say enough. Just glad to be here.
Hey, Richard. Richard, this is Gerry. Can you hear what's being said? Mike?
Gerry, we're going to see if we can work the audio better for you. We've got one pickup, and so you're picking up from the front, and so we're going to see if we can optimize that a little bit. In the meantime, let me go ahead and introduce the members of the panel. Via Skype, we have Colonel Gerry Carr, commander of the 3rd Skylab mission, who also helped contribute to the design of the International Space Station. We have Dr. Owen Garriott, the science pilot for the 2nd Skylab mission specialist number 1 for STS-9, the first Space Lab mission, longtime Huntsville resident, and of course, most importantly, co-author of Homesteading Space, a Skylab story. Also on Skype, his son, Richard Garriott. Richard himself, a spaceflight participant, creator of life-changing for me, the ultimate series of video games.
Excellent.
I knew who Richard was long before I knew who his father was, actually. So when he flew on the International Space Station 11 years ago, it was quite a sight to see it pass overhead. Here in person, we have, of course, Dwight, we've already introduced, the filmmaker behind tonight's movie. Dr. Ed Gibson, science pilot of the 3rd Skylab, who literally wrote the book on the science of the sun. Col Jack Lousma, pilot of the 2nd crew of Skylab and commander of STS-3 space shuttle mission. His daughter, Mary Cohn, beyond her, Sue was next. Sue Bean, the former wife of Captain Alan Bean, who was, of course, the commander of the lunar of Skylab 2, and also did a little bit on Apollo 12. You may have heard of that mission. Beyond her, Amy Sue Bean, who is keeping her father's legacy alive through her website, moonwalker.com, and so I encourage you to go and check out her blog there and the writing that she's doing, honoring the legacy of Apollo. Willy Weaver worked for almost 29 years at Marshall Space Flight Center in test and verification of electronic and electronic systems. After that, 14 years at Teledyne Brown Engineering, still works as a consultant. Has been a docent out here at the Space and Rocket Center for almost 4 years. Looks like Roy is after him. Long career with McDonnell Douglas, worked on the Skylab program. Roy actually moved to Huntsville 3 times before he decided he liked it enough to actually stay here. John Reeves, 50 years with NASA, began at Marshall Space Flight Center in 1964, was a project manager for Hubble. If you would like to know more about John, I encourage you to get his baseball card. If you have not had a personal encounter with an emeritus docent at the Space and Rocket Center, you can have a conversation with any of them, get their baseball cards. You would learn that John Reeves' hometown is Fairfield, Alabama, year of birth 1945. University attended was Auburn University, major and minors in industrial and systems engineering, mechanical engineering. I will wait for you to get your own, find out the rest of the information, but I will note that it has a naked picture of Jack Lousma on the back. So,
I only had one problem on that card. Under hobbies, I lifted my grandkids last.
On the far side of John is Alyene Baker, who arguably could be in the family category. He's the son of, and I'm sorry, I should have asked you how to pronounce her name. Please, Alyene Baker, who you saw in the movie sewing the parasol for the Skylab rescue effort. She was the seamstress for the parasol that was deployed out of the airlock. That said, does a little bit about spaceflight himself. 42 years at Johnson Space Center, former manager of Operations Support Office at JSC. And beyond him is Jay Chladek, who is the author of Outposts on the Frontier, a recent volume in the Outbound Odyssey series that Homesteading Space is part of. So if I can get a big hand for our panelists. Does anyone have a question?
That's just what I said. The answer is yes.
Anyone have a question? All right. Oh, yes, back here.
It seemed to be like you had a lot of fun. Were there some stories that you didn't have on the movie that were pranks that you played on each other when you were out there?
Well, let's see. There were pranks played, but they were on us by this guy here. They decided before they left their flight that they would get some of our spacesuits and stuff them full of whatever to make them look human, and then have them in various places working in the Skylab. So when we arrived there, we found one on a bicycle and one in the lower body negative pressure, and another one doing his duty in the laboratory. And so we were so busy when we first got up there, we didn't have time to take them all down. So it was kind of disconcerting because you look over your shoulder and you figure there's some other people up there with you. Yeah, they got us on that one.
I can't believe that you blame that on me. but in honor of all our fallen Skylabers, they all had a great sense of humor too, so I think I ought to tell a humorous story in some of them. By the way, I want to thank all of you out there who helped to make us famous and who contributed to the Skylab, and they're not getting the real recognition that you need for it, but I started coming here in 1967, and it was hard to find a place to stay because there were only 2 motels in town. Things have really changed, haven't they? Yeah. And we enjoyed coming here to meet with all the engineers on the Skylab, on the Lunar Rover, on the Skylab rebooster, and we would often come to, of course, training in Werner von Braun's huge water tank, neutral buoyancy tank, when the Skylab was there. And one of the things we remember is that during noon hour, he would often ask us to come to his office to have lunch with a couple of his buddies. And they wanted to talk about the Skylab, and we wanted to talk about Pinamundi. Some real good stories. One of the stories that I should relate here before I don't get a chance to is how we managed some of the things that we use on the Skylab. Skylab was really a major logistics marvel, because everything that we were going to use, and in the order that we were going to use it, had to be packed aboard the Skylab before it launched. I mean, every little can of beans or every suit of clothes was there for us to use for all those 3 missions, and it had to be stowed before we left. So a lot of that work was done by many of you well before the launch of the Skylab itself. And we had all of these things rationed for the first, second, and third crew, and the food and the clothes and film and all those kinds of things. And we were unable to use something that belonged to the crew after us because that was all limits. And one of the items that was in short supply but was rationed were our coveralls. We could wear our coveralls for about 2 weeks, and they had to change them for a new model. Another one, of course, was our underwear, our skivvies, as many of you know what they are. And we had a change of those every other day, which was a good deal. Now, we were going to be up for 56 days. That was the plan. And so that meant that we had 28 pairs of skivvies. And the problem came when we started to come home. We weren't going to be over the recovery force for 3 or 4 more days. So we're going to have an extra 3 or 4 days in our world's favorite vacation spot. And we didn't think of it because it just didn't matter to us. But the ground keeps track of these kind of things. And they said, you're going to get to stay for another 3 or 4 days, but we've got a problem in that when you get to day 58, you're not going to get to change the skivvies because you've used them all up and you can't get anybody else's. But they said, don't worry, we are going to solve that problem for you. And so they worked on that problem, and about day 58, they said, we have a solution to the skivvy problem. And these were in the days of the good news and bad news jokes. If you laugh, I know how old you are. And they said, we got good news and we got bad news. The good news is you're going to get to change your skivvies today. The bad news is, Al, you change with Jack, and Jack keeps changing. So that's in the honor of the humor that we've lost, and we hope that we can make up some of it that way. There are lots of other great stories, too.
Did you do it, sir?
Ask Owen.
All right, anybody else have a question? Yes, here.
You got one on the screen.
Oh,
Richard.
Richard, question.
Oh, yeah, mine wasn't a question as much as I was going to offer up another thought on the practical jokes. You saw in the film the practical jokes that my father and Mom Helen played the mission control. And so, of course, I felt obligated to follow in the family tradition. So I both played long-distance mind control magic tricks with my papa that you see on the screen. but I also took up, just like he took up recording of my mother talking about bringing up home-cooked meals. That was a joke that repeated itself in The Apogee of Fear that I think you guys may have seen as well tonight, as well as I took up recordings, but made it more modern ways, like digital press, on what I wanted my mom to say so that I could spook mission control in Russia with commentary live in real time with a banner of recordings that I made of my mother's voice.
All right, there was a question over here. Over here, yes.
For Owen, what was the favorite science experiment that y'all did while you were up there?
For Owen, what was the favorite science experiment that you did up there?
I don't do any special assignment, but did a lot of work on solar astronomy. We had the best telescopes in the world, but now we had them in space, and they were not obscured by the clouds beneath us. And so I would say looking at the science experiments from space was one of the most exciting things that we did on board.
Yes.
So I have a technical question on the Apollo telescope mount. The Apollo telescope mount and the lab, the workshop. Can you describe, the movie kind of talked about it briefly, but can you talk about the importance of the solar arrays in the Apollo telescope mount in the first mission in terms of recovering the laboratory? Because it was not originally intended, as I understand it, to be attached to Skylab, and at some point that electrical system was connected to the main lab. Can you talk about that part of the design?
Can you answer that, Richard? I didn't really get the gist of the question very well.
Yeah, the question was, describe any details about how the Apollo telescope was attached.
And we're going to let Willy Weaver take a stab at this one.
Okay.
Okay, when we lost one of the solar panels on the main lab, we were short of power, and I do recall that there had been some discussion prior during the design whether to make it possible to patch power from one set of panels, the panels on the lab and the panels on the telescope mount. And it was finally the decision was made to make the connectors where they could patch between the two. And that allowed using some of the power from the telescope mount back in the main lab.
All right. Anybody else? One back there.
It's hard for me to imagine doing what you all did. It's just amazing. And, I know your career is built up to those moments. And it must have been something when it was all over, that maybe that was the highlight. Did you find yourself looking for the next ride, or how did you kind of cope with had to be a little bit of a downer not to have another one to go on?
The question was, being part of this had to be a great ride. At the end of it, when it was done, how did you cope with the ending, and did you look forward to the next thing?
Yes. We had a great opportunity to live a dream that was ours for a long time, for which we struggled a lot with a lot of other people to make it happen. And to get all the credit for doing that, we're the lucky recipients of that. But what we do after we finish a mission is we get together and write a crew report, and we usually go on a public relations tour that is directed by NASA. Sometimes it includes an overseas visit, and then we're eager to get on with the next thing. And So we're hoping we're going to be in line for another flight, or on the other hand, perhaps we've had enough and decide that it's time to quit what we're doing and go out and work for a living. And so it differs with the individual. You'll see some who will hang around and fly 5, 6 flights, others who will fly 1 or 2. It just depends on the individual and how much they wish to continue. In my own case, I wanted to command a mission, which I did after the Skylab mission. It was the 3rd test flight of the Space Shuttle Columbia. And then I was getting ready to fly another flight, which was 2 years downstream or so. And I got into the simulator and I said, I know all this, I've done this. I really don't want to spend 2 more years doing something I already did. I'd rather go off and do something else. And I kind of lost the buzz for it, as a matter of fact. And then after that, why, it was clear that it wasn't worth the risk to myself or to my family if I wasn't really as dedicated to doing it as I would otherwise be. So that was my feeling, and it wasn't that of others, but there comes a time when you want to be moving on. And most of all of our people have, whether they've flown 1 flight or 6 flights, they've gone into other challenges that are rewarding to them personally and which make a difference to the people with whom they're working and the people in this country.
I want to speak a little bit to this just because my dad had kind of a unique story in this area. After he came back from Skylab, he was on the backup crew for the Apollo-Soyuz test project. But then when that was complete, you know, the people were gearing up to fly the shuttle, and he found that he was more interested in art then, in painting every day, and that's what he did on his free time. So yeah, you know, you fly, he flew a mission, he was still interested in it, but then he started to think about other things, and like Jack said, sometimes other interests just catch you, and his passion changed, and he no longer started thinking about flying, he started thinking about painting. And so that's why he did leave, and even though he loved his career at NASA and he felt really good about it and was proud and just so pleased, he was ready to move on to the next thing. So that was just as exciting to him as commanding the Skylab mission or flying to the moon, was you know, painting about that time in his life.
I had the privilege of being on that backup crew with the flight with the Russians with Alan after we had completed the Skylab flight. 6 weeks or 8 weeks later, we were in Moscow, knee-deep in snow and ice, training for that mission. And we did that for about a year and a half or so, and it was a real privilege to work with Al on that, as I did on some other projects as well. Very good friend, and he has a long live in my memory. But what I was going to say was that when we were backing up the flight with the Russians, Alan was painting. He had had some lessons, and he was painting pictures of fruit in bowls and flowers in vases. But he stayed around long enough at his job to the point where he became a very well-known and famous artist. And I think on his first audition, or whatever artists call it, he had 6 paintings for sale, I think, and they were all sold before they were shown. So he was off and running, and so he did very well, very quickly, from flowers to moon paintings.
And I have to say, I'm going to jump in, but he painted this purse right here, and so he could have gone in and made purses. So he painted he's very craftsman. I mean, so you never know where these astronauts are going to go with their next journey, and you know, some actually do video games and do some crazy and then be an astronaut later in life. And so just follow your dreams. Yeah.
And keep them guessing.
Keep them guessing. Stay out of politics. This one tried it, didn't go real well, but we're very thankful that
And don't let the old man in.
So I'm going to ask a corollary question to that. For several of the folks on the panel, the next thing they did was shaping the future of space flight. I'm gonna actually get Colonel Carr to be first, because he worked very hard shaping what became the International Space Station
in terms of the legacy of Skylab on spaceflight today, where do we see the fingerprints of Skylab in what NASA and the American Space Program are doing today?
Well, I think our fingerprints are probably, for the most part, are in scheduling. Bill Fogg and I formed up a company, and we to work for Boeing as a subcontractor for technical support. We had a lot of fun teaching young engineers who thought they knew everything in the world about airplanes, but when it came to spacecraft, that needed a lot of help. And I think probably the most important thing to convince everybody that you need to have a schedule that keeps productive. If you're not productive, you're not going to get the things done that you need to get done. And so productivity was a very important part of our into the space station program.
Hey, this is Richard. I'd like to just make what Gerry said there. You know, I, of course, as a young child, got to see a lot of the scheduling take place, but then as an adult, got to see how difficult it was to do. And, you know, I got to tell you, one of the main reasons my flight was as successful as it was because I had an experienced astronaut like Dad who had been through that process, so that every time, for example, I would miss a scheduled experiment that required, for example, looking out the window, you better hit the window at the right time or it can't work. They would have to go back and reshuffle that schedule, rebuild that schedule for the day. And, you know, that came a little bit in the movie. Gerry just talked about it there, but I can also just tell you from 30, 40 years later, 35 years later, first-hand experience, that having these guys there to do that scheduling made the mission success possible.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Well, one thing is, when we got to the ISS, we had kind of relearned some of the lessons of Skylab, because when Shuttle Mir came around, things were kind of thrown together so quick that Mission Operations Director in Houston was so used to the short mission that they kind of had to rethink how they were going to manage on the ground for long-term operations. So having experienced people in there to kind of say, hey, this is how we did it, it's a marathon, not a sprint, that came in very handy. And as a result, very good scientific return on the ISS today, in my opinion.
Hello, testing. I'd like to input something. A while ago, we were talking about spin-offs, and not exactly spin-offs, but advantages and values we've learned, new things, and what's next. One thing that hasn't been emphasized nearly enough here tonight and elsewhere all over the country is the value we got from the data that was recorded during those 3 missions. The ERIPS experiment, that was the Earth's Resource Package or something. I've forgotten the exact name of it, but that was 6 cameras, all bore-sighted to take exactly the same picture when triggered. The only difference was that each lens had a different color filter. One single set of 6 pictures taken in 1974 discovered a deposit of copper in Utah valued at far more than the entire Skylab program cost. And I could go on and on. I made a lot of speeches on the values, the spin-off values we get from going to space. In fact, one time I was helping to tour the Undersecretary of the Army, and they wanted a technical guy there. And he was telling me his biggest problem was getting funding. They give it funding today, take it away tomorrow. I suggested that he emphasize and justify his needs, but tell them in Congress that you're getting a lot of spin-off value for other things that are more than paid for many things we're doing. So, and by the way, I'll just say a couple other things while I'm here. I'm old.
Hey, room FYI, we lost your audio.
Say again?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, where was I? I'm good at being old. These spin-off values are very, very important to the nation. It more than pays for itself frequently. And while I'm on this mic, I'd like to say that the film we saw tonight was pretty realistic, obviously, and it told a lot of the key things. There's one thing that I think I can expand on that'd be interesting to you. Two things. The bolt cutter that was used to cut the debris to release the panel was a pair of just simple bolt cutters with 14 inches welded on to make the handles longer so that the astronaut would have more force. And he was able to cut that debris finally, but the solar panels did not deploy because there was a shock-absorbing device filled with hydraulic fluid that pushed against the spring that was pushing it out, so it came out gently. And we figured out ahead of time that hydraulic oil would be frozen by the time we get to it. And so when he cut that, the thing still did not come out, and we had to, what was that? Yeah, we,
Beam erection tether?
I'm sorry, what?
Use the beam erection tether, whipped around to pull on it?
I can't hear, I told you that. But I'll tell you the other hydraulic problem. When it did come out, the pistons that were to extend the solar panels out from under the cover, they were also frozen. But that was easy to fix because all we had to do was tilt the Skylab so that the sun would shine on those, and they melted within just several minutes. And so those panels came out and performed beautifully. In fact, just a wee bit above spec. Often you find it just barely meets spec. On the solar panels, they were very good and did perform their job well. And I'll shut up for a while.
Yeah, just real quickly, talking about what Skylab meant to the missions that followed. We learned a lot about crew scheduling as the movie showed, and I think that has really benefited the people in the space station because we started off knowing how to put together a reasonable schedule, putting those things down that have to be done at a given time, and then put the rest on a shopping list and let the crew run as fast as they can to meet all those things. And every time I start beating my chest about Skylab, I picture where we're going in the future. Captain Kirk would be kind of scoffing at us because we're still going all around the Earth. On our Skylab flight, we traveled on all 3 flights. We traveled the distance that light goes in 6 minutes. It takes light over 4 years just to reach our nearest star. So when it comes to real space travel, as Captain Crick will judge it, we barely put our toe out the front door. So for all you young kids here, that's everybody under 30. There's a lot yet to do, and we're just barely started.
Talk a little bit about being a family member. Alan and I were married, we were college sweethearts, we were both gymnasts, and when we first met, we were in a gymnastic meet with another college, and he said, save me a seat, and I did for the next 25 years. But anyway, we came to NASA in 1964, January, at Johnson Space Center in Houston. We both went to the University of Texas, and we were in the Navy for 7.5 years, and then we came back to Texas, and we were happy to be there. There was no grocery store even in Johnson Space Center. It wasn't open. So we saw the community grow up. We had 2 children, and Alan was a great engineer. He loved what he did. Our children experienced most of the time, all of the training was on the Cape. So the guys would leave on Monday morning or Sunday afternoon and go to the Cape for training and come back Friday afternoon. But our children grew up in a wonderful community in Nassau Bay. We had a strong family. Every night when he was home, we cooked dinner and had dinner, and we had a strong family unit. We were very good friends with all of the other astronauts and their families. In fact, the wives stuck together. Whenever there was an emergency, we were right at each other's doorstep. But I want to talk a little bit too about his artwork. When we were young and married, we didn't have any furniture, so the first thing he did in Beeville, Texas, when he was in training as a pilot, he went to build some furniture for us, and he built all of our furniture. Then we later went to test pilot school. We built a home in Pax River, and we didn't have any paintings or pictures for our walls. So we went out and looked, and he said, oh, I'm going to paint something. So he started painting. And he actually took art lessons at the community college there. And later, when we came back to Houston, it was one of our first homes that we built. He designed the home and picked out every brick and everything inside of it. Took forever to build. But we were good friends, even after we divorced after 25 years. And we were always good friends. And our main concern was our family. And we have 8 grandchildren. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Alan. He was a great person and a great husband.
I wish we had the video to show, but I'd like John Reeves to tell us a story when he was a co-op student at KSC and how he gave the Saturn V a tennis shoe test.
I bet there's a lot of people here that know about this. It came out on YouTube about 15 years ago because it had been kind of a secret of how we actually performed the ground wind test. It was designed to see how much ground wind the Saturn 500F, which was our facility Saturn at KSC. It was a flight Saturn, just like the one here, but it was used for strictly testing. Ours was used for structural testing, and the one at KSC was used for testing the VAB, the launch pad, the crawler, all the interfaces the Saturn V had to go through. Well, make it short. The first rollout of the Saturn V was done in May of '66 out to the pad. Hurricane Alma was coming up the coast of Florida. People got concerned that we need to roll back, and they did roll back. Then later we got a call from Marshall, and they wanted us to do a ground wind test to see what the Saturn V could take. So we sent an instrumentation trailer to Cape, myself, guy named Tommy Brooks and a guy named Charlie Chisholm went down there. And we started instrumenting the Saturn V with load cells and accelerometers. And we had strip chart recorders in those days, and everything was analog. We carried some dynamic shakers down there. Of course, dynamic shakers typically, unless you special order one, they're high frequency shakers. We had to figure out how to get the Saturn V moving like wind was pushing it. So one night after midnight, when all the managers had gone home, we got together and said, why don't we get 8 guys on the structure with the tennis shoes on, start pushing on the Saturn V, get 8 more guys up on the escape tower with the rope, and we'll start pulling in sync. We'll get it moving, let it damp out, and we'll take it out. Worked perfectly. I was one of the guys on the end of the rope.
I was given a question for.
Oh, you can watch this, because just enter this in your search engine, Saturn V tennis shoe test, it will come up, it'll run, and it has Charlie Chaplin music playing in the background.
All right, I was given a question for Dwight, which is, what do you want people to take away from the movie?
I'd like people to take away a better understanding of what Skylab was all about, and that is actually why the title is Searching for Skylab. It didn't mean that we went to Western Australia trying to find it. It was trying to find a meaning as to what it gave humanity. And because it fell in the shadow of Apollo, it was forgotten about because it was at a point where people were fed up with watching, they wanted to watch I Love Lucy instead of watching live television from the moon. And I personally find that incredible, how that could happen in such a short space of time. And there is so much out there on Skylab. My wife will tell everybody I've analysed and watched about 600 hours worth of footage, and that's a lot of footage. The best I can also explain it, we asked the first Belgian in space in the Netherlands last year, do you use Skylab data to plan ISS missions? And this was Dirk Fremont, and he said to us, we do not have enough scientists able to be analysing these photos and this data, and that is 45 years after the fact. They do not have enough people that can analyse and get information from these photographs. So it's an ongoing process. So yeah, and I'd definitely like the general public.
I'm sure a lot of hands would go up if they would put that out there.
Yes. Oh, and Mr. Richard Weaver, it's indeed wonderful to see you again. And I want to say that you all deserve a tremendous debt of gratitude of everyone for the magnificent advances that you made in solar physics during the Skylab mission. Wondered if you and Ed would make a few comments about what you consider to be the most important observations and discoveries with the Apollo telescope now.
You can hear that. Oh, and that's Richard Hoover, who says that talks about Skylab's incredible contributions in solar physics, and wondered if you and Ed could comment on that.
Go ahead, you try it first, Ed.
Did he hand it off to me?
Yes.
Check it.
Just mopping it or he's no fool.
Well, we learned that we got a lot of information from, especially from the X-ray photographs, where we learned a lot about the magnetic field structure of the sun. Most people think of the sun as just a big round yellow ball that doesn't have much detail to it, but when you look at it in X-rays and ultraviolet light, there's a lot of things going on and a lot of things happening. The most dynamic is solar flares, and that affects us down here when we get a big one. It certainly puts a lot of radiation out. Sometimes it affects us, it's going to certainly affect us on long-term space missions, and affecting all the satellites up there. And so we don't know how to predict, we didn't know how to predict that. I think we got a much better picture now that we understand the magnetic structure of the sun. And we did a lot of that trying to understand that on Skylab. We tried to capture a flare when it was about to occur. Since most of the data was captured on film, and there was a limited amount of film, and when you want to get a flare, because it happens so quickly, you have to burn up a lot of film. So you didn't want to make the mistake of running it off when nothing happened. At the same time, you didn't want to miss something good, so it took a little judgment. And we failed a few times, but eventually, I think we got pretty good pictures of the early history of that. So that, those details and magnetic structure of what they call active regions, and also bright points, which people didn't know about on the sun. There are just many active regions on the sun we didn't know about. So we learned an awful lot about that gave people a lot more to start investigating. And you know, the kids who are growing up nowadays accept it all as normal, but back in the early 1970, a lot of these things were not known. So we got in one fell swoop, we got a pretty good step forward on what we know about it. Owen, go ahead.
Well, we'll handle it. I'm satisfied with your answer.
Okay. Good.
There is, of course, little point in having power if you're not going to use it. So I'm going to, as moderator, hold the last question for myself. But first, I want you to take a moment and just capture this moment, right? I want you to take a moment so that years from now you'll remember where you were today. Because in all the world, everywhere on Earth, today is the 45th anniversary of the end of Skylab. But in all the Earth, there's only one room where you're getting to spend it with the people who were there, with the people who made it happen. You are unique in this entire place. And it's been touched on tonight, that's not coincidence. Dwight didn't just wake up one morning, spin a globe, and say, boop, Huntsville, Alabama, right? We're in Huntsville, Alabama because of how much of it happened here. Because of what this city, what Marshall Space Flight Center did to contribute to this happening. But Huntsville is the rocket city, not just because of what happened with the Redstone, not just because of what happened with the Saturn V, not just because of what happened with Skylab, because of what's happening today. This city today is actively working to build rockets like no other, with a space launch system, with Blue Origin breaking ground here, with ULA just down the highway. We have a storied and incredible past, but we have an amazing future ahead of us. We are at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, which as you come in has a little sign that says, Home of Space People. This is where that future is being made. This is where that future is being shaped. So my question, and I'd like any of the panelists who would, we'll just go down the line, I'd like to start with the Skype panelists. When the young people who are in space camp today are the engineers and the astronauts and the artists who are shaping the future of space exploration, what would you like to see the legacy of Skylab be?
Gerry, Dad?
Well, I would like the Skylab legacy to be the fact that we are now in a place where we're ready to put somebody on a different planet, more than a year's travel away. And I think that legacy of Skylab has taught us a lot about the human body. We can handle these kinds of rigors that will require us to make a one-year trip to their body, and what will happen to the human body when we come back. So these, I think that's our legacy, really, is we kind of broke the ground space station by proving that you can stay in space for a long period of time as long as you take care of your body. That's just the beginning. That's basically, we were the beginning, I think, and I'm glad to see that people are taking it and running with it.
Dad?
No. was happy to go along with what Gerry just described.
Hey, Richard, it's all on you.
All right. Hey, I've had the great luxury of being quite a young boy around these, 9 great astronauts who had the privilege of flying at the tip of the spear that the tens of thousands of people, including many of your parents there, had the chance to build. And so I sort of feel like I'm, the first generation of those people directly inspired by these guys to get a chance to fly. But I like what Jack said a little while ago, which is that, it's the people in this room under the age of 30 that are going to get a chance to now really take this further. I sort of feel like we've been stuck in low Earth orbit now for 30 years, and it's about time we are finally beginning to move further out than the moon and the solar system. And but the people that are going to get a chance to do that and drive that are the people in that room right now. And so, to me, the real legacy of Skylab is only coming true now. The ISS has been building on it and expanding on it, but the real mission is further out, and that's just beginning.
While we have a little interlude here, I would just like to comment on this. And I would like to see the legacy of not only Skylab, but all of the things that we do in space and all the things that we do in technology, whether it's military or civilian, all the kinds of things that you people in Huntsville do will leave a legacy of inspiration for our young people. And I could make a long speech on that, but I think they could encapsulate it by saying to our young people, and this is what I hope the legacy will be that we leave, and that is to dream big, aim high, work hard, and never, ever, ever, never give up.
I'd just like to add one other thing that Dad said a lot, legacy of Skylab, it's all of those things, but you know what? We can have a lot of fun doing it, and there's a lot to be said for that. We can, explore, we can develop, we can create, and as humans, we want to have fun doing it. We want to love what we do, and I think that you just continue to move forward, and Skylab shows you can do all of those things and have a great experience and enjoy life.
I think another spin-off or a follow-up effort could be considered, and that's to mock what they're doing with the moon. They're using that as a filling station, a thing for longer deep space missions. I tend to believe, I haven't researched this, but you can have another Skylab, but at a higher level, or you don't have the problem of maintaining the orbit, and it could be a filling station for spares or whatever, so that you could fix rockets, payloads that are floating in orbit now, and I think that's a possible thing, and I invite anybody who's interested to look into it. I'm not very good at that kind of thing, I'll admit that. I like to see the finished product and test it to see if it does what it's supposed to do.
Well, I'm kind of unique because I'm not a member of the space community. I'm just a guy that researches and writes books. But when I came to Huntsville the first time in '85, I was basically the young space camper who was trying to learn about the legacy of this hardware. And to me, the takeaway of Skylab is that, well, it started out planned a certain way, but then very early on, it went sideways, and it was people of various different disciplines working on things that they never think about working on, like whomever it was that came up with the pruning shear system to cut the bolt and stuff. And then people having to make the parasol. Mother of Herb here who had to sew it and all that. I mean, it just goes to show, I think the legacy of Skylab is that legacy of innovation, putting things back on track. You may plan for it to go a certain way and it doesn't. And something that's open-ended and not closed-ended and happening in things in ways that you didn't expect originally. And to me, that's what space exploration is about. It's about that, and the thing is, there is a place in this industry for people of all walks of life, multiple disciplines, as long as you have an interest in it. You don't have to be an astronaut, you don't have to be an engineer. As long as you just have a desire to be involved in it, go ahead and do it. The path may not go the way you think it does, but you can accomplish some very incredible things, just like this big space station, which was thrown together with leftover hardware from the Apollo program and some stuff from Gemini and some stuff from this, accomplished all those years ago.
I did want to say one thing. Even though I worked for NASA for 42 years, the reason I'm here tonight is representing my mother, who passed away 12 years ago. And I didn't realize until this morning, it struck me, it was exactly on this day, 12 years ago, that she passed away. And I can't think of any way to better honor her than doing exactly what I'm doing here tonight, watching this film and spending the evening with all of you. So she would have loved it.
Yeah, and what I would like to say is, you know, even us here today are standing on the shoulders of those that started in the space program, many of them giving the ultimate sacrifice. You know, those that we lost in the early days, the 1B testing, Challenger in Columbia. I think we owe it to them to continue our efforts, try to get more emphasis from our government and our public interest. I think that's the one thing that we need to work on more than anything else. I mean, we're getting like 0.3 of a penny of the tax dollar for all of NASA today. In the heyday of Apollo, we're getting about 2 cents of the tax dollar. You know, we've just got to get more people interested in what we're doing and realize that this little blue dot in the middle of the universe may not be here always. And, you know, of course, we've got plans to go to Mars, back to the moon maybe, but we've got to have support, not just the people at NASA and the people on the street that live in Huntsville and the cities that promote NASA. We've got to get the whole country behind us if we're going to get there.
And I'd like to inject one quick thing. Almost every day when I'm out on the floor as a docent, somebody, at least one, will come up and say, I got my start in space camp. Space camp has kicked off many, many kinds of careers, not necessarily space. They learn in these space camp things like discipline, communication, organization, things that are needed in every project you undertake.
If I could say one thing as well. I was speaking with a lovely lady just in the break after the film who wants to be a science writer, and she asked me, do I have any tips? And I can tell you one thing, making this movie was an adventure that I cannot describe in words. We've had highs, we've had lows. I was ready to surrender, and I chose not to, with the support of my wife and everybody here was saying, you've got to do it, you've got to do it. So my word of advice to everybody here, do not give up and follow your dream. Then you'll sit at the table with Skylab astronauts. You did a great job.
Notes about exiting and the autograph sessions, but before she does, first off, another big round of applause for the Space and Rocket Center. Bill Pogue, Dr. Ed Gibson.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to ask everyone to exit out the center aisle to the top. As you know, Colonel Lousma and Dr. Gibson have agreed to sign a few autographs tonight. So there is a table that we will position them at in just a few minutes. So if you guys want to meet us upstairs underneath the Saturn V, we'll see you in just a second.